Hey, good morning, guys. Darin Marques. I am here today for episode number 4, and we're going to be doing things a little bit differently today. Number one, we're on Instagram Live at the same time, so we're going to be taking some questions while we're sitting here. But I'm going to be doing this solo today. Wanted to switch things up a little bit, mostly because I get a lot of questions throughout the week or even after a lot of the podcasts that we do. And so today what I want to do is just spend some time answering those questions. There's different things that come up, just even, challenges in business and stuff like that throughout the week that I wanted to make sure that we address through the show. Obviously, one of the things and one of the main focuses is that, we're talking about recession busters. And again, I'd shared a few weeks ago when we started this programming that recession busters was really all about, not getting into the political side of it or the negative side of it. And people wallowing in the fact that, hey, you know what, there's a recession and things are going to get horrible. I'm an optimist by nature. And so I always like to look at the brighter side of things. I try to find the good in everything that's happening or find the positive. And I always believe, and I've experienced this myself, is that in every situation, there's opportunities, right? So no matter where we're at in the market, right, there's always somebody capitalizing in that. There's somebody always that sees the opportunity. And that's where there's great opportunity for growth for entrepreneurs as well. And that even goes back to myself. I've shared with a lot of you some of my background, and I'll just kind of give you a summary. I grew up here in Vegas. I always like to share with people that my dad was a Marine. And so that's where some of my discipline comes from. Partially why I like to wake up so early is because as a kid, I think that 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning was late to my dad. He would usually come in and wake us up by that point. And he really didn't care if we had been out partying all night and got home at 6:30 in the morning. We were still getting up at 8 a.m. And it's really cool because nowadays I've seen how that's, as kids, my brother and I, we would always complain about it that, oh my God, Dad is so mean, man. He makes us wake up and makes us work hard. And it's really cool to see now how that's transitioned into both my brother and I, and just how our work experiences and our work ethic is what I want to say. And so, and some of the takeaways from my dad, it's pretty cool as a kid. My dad's still alive. He's 88 years old. He's a machine, still gets up every day, rebuilds golf carts. That's his new thing. He was a mechanic and rebuilt cars for quite a long time. And now he rebuilds golf carts because they're a little lighter and easy to work with. But he is an absolute machine, still gets up every day, still got his goal for the day. That's something that he would always tell us is, Darin, always think about what you're going to accomplish for the day. He goes, when I set out for my day, I always think about what's the one thing that I'm going to get done today. And, those are some of the principles that he taught us when we were younger. He had this thing, I'll never forget, my brother had a soccer team, and it was the 10 commandments of success. And some of those things were being liked. I find it so interesting in today's market. Everybody has this mindset of like, well, I don't give a fuck what people think about me and I don't really care. The reality is you really do. And this whole hater generation, the thing about people talking about, I've got haters. To me, that is the most egotistical thing in the world. If you think that you've got haters, number one, you've got a problem, right? Number one, if you're even acknowledging those haters, you've got a problem. If you're worried about those haters, you've got a problem. Because why are you focused on them, right? And so I'm talking about that today because one of the things that my dad talked about was always being liked, and it's important to be liked. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be a pushover, doesn't mean that you have to let people walk all over you, but it means being genuine, be yourself, get people to like you, because I can tell you so many times in my life where I should not have had opportunities, I received opportunities because, and it was interesting because it would like hit me like a lightning strike. I'd be sitting in meetings or an appointment or a job interview or an interview with a client on a listing, and we'd be going through the whole thing. And at the very end, they'd say, Darin, you know what? We're going to give you an opportunity because we like you. We really like you. And every time they would say that, it would kick back to what my dad has always said to us, is that one of the best things I can ever teach you, no matter what your level of education is, no matter what your skill level is if people like you, people will want to help you and want to do things for you. And no doubt, I have seen that come across so many times in my life. And so I really, when I hear people talk about, well, I've got these haters, and to me, it's like, why would you even want people to hate you? That's my question, right? And if they do hate you, why? And if they do hate you, then maybe there's a reason. Maybe you're an asshole. Maybe that's the bottom line. Maybe you're an asshole, and that's why people hate you. No matter how successful you are, or no matter what, I really think that, it does come down to one of those things that he always taught us, which was, being liked. Some of being liked, I think, plays into some of the areas that he taught us, which was being on time. And I never really understood it when I was young. Obviously, it was frustrating because as a kid, you want to be late everywhere. But being on time is important because, one, it's showing respect to the other side, right? It's showing the person on the other side that, hey, I care about your time enough that I'm going to be early. I'm going to show up on time and that I respect you. And that's why I'm here. And, those are all things that lead into being liked, because when you show up on time and the person sees that, hey, this person really cares about my time and what I'm doing, then again, they start to become a little bit more attracted to you, not in a way of, they want you as a boyfriend or girlfriend, but just meaning that they care about you. They start to care about you because you care about them. And so those were always some of the things that he taught us. And it's interesting through the years, no matter what struggles I've gone through, my wife just recently even found out that I've had, like, in my 47 years of existence and really starting my own businesses. I had my own business, believe it or not, starting when I was 13. My parents didn't have a lot of money. And so one of the ways for me to make money, I was always wanting to get out there and hustle, is that I started a little car wash business in our neighborhood. And so I had a food crate that I got from the Albertsons or Lucky's next door. And I would put my buffer in there, and I would put all my car wash materials. And I'll never forget, I went to the store and I had a picture of my brother's truck. My brother had a lowrider at the time that was super detailed out. And so I took that picture, I taped it to the front of a piece of paper that I had typed on and said, car wash services and car detailing available. And I went and I made 50 copies and I rolled them all up and I went and put them on all the neighbors' doors. And pretty soon I started getting business. And I was like, wow, this is pretty easy. Like, you just go and you ask people for business and pretty soon it starts coming. And so at 13, and one of the exciting things for me at 13 was that the neighbors would let me move their car, right? So I got a chance to get in the car, start it up, back it out in the driveway. And I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. And so at that point, it really kind of gave me my first insight into starting my own business. And my dad, quite frankly, when I would ask for certain things, was like, hey, if you want it, you're going to have to go work for it. And I'm like, well, I'm 13 years old. And he's like, well, go clean cars or something. And so that's what I started doing. I went and started cleaning the neighbors' cars, started making money. And then at the age of 15, just barely turning 15, I actually got my first job at a fitness store, a health food store here in the Valley, and started working at 15. And just to kind of give you some background on the level of discipline that, I really believe comes from my dad and obviously with my mom's support. But I started competing in bodybuilding at 15 years old. And so in order to do that, because I went to school, I would get up at 3:15 a.m. in the morning. I'd get to the gym by 3:45. I'd eat my meals. I'd come home. I'd get ready for school, go to school, come home from school, take a quick 30-minute nap, go to work. I'd work till 9 o'clock at night. And then I would go back and I would do another 2 hours of training till 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night, get up and do it all over again. And usually that would be for a 12 to 16 week period. One of the most interesting things that I learned during that time period, and, I've even shared this with my wife before. It's interesting because I got to this point in my life where I looked at all of these businesses that I had as failures. And people would even say to me, every time I went to start another business, they would say, well, Darin, why are you doing another business, dude? Didn't you fail at the other one? And I'm like, yeah, but I figured this out from the last one. And this time I'm going to do this a little bit different. But the one thing that I learned one thing looking back is that none of those were truly failures to me, because everything that I learned from those businesses has transitioned into what I use today in business. Everything from my retail experience and learning how to merchandise things and how people react when they walk into a retail environment. Believe it or not, the things that I use in my retail store, I use today in listings and showing properties. But I bring this up because in bodybuilding, one of the biggest things that I learned at that time that I didn't realize was time management. Because I had so little time, my time was crunched throughout the day. I literally didn't even have 30 minutes throughout the day to take a break to do anything, lay down and watch TV or anything. And at 15 years old, I was time blocking my week. Everything from, 3:15 in the morning to, everything that I did hour by hour throughout the day, I started time blocking. Flash forward 25 years later, time blocking is what I teach all of my team. Anybody that I've worked with in business, one of the biggest things I always tell them the thing that has helped me succeed and has always gotten me back on track. And of course, you can't always stick to it. You fall off track, but it's like a weightlifting program. There's going to be days that you miss the gym, but the point of having the program is that the next day you get back in there and you get right back on track. And that's the time management part of it. And that was one of the things that I learned from bodybuilding. And even though I never pursued going further than a national level in bodybuilding, I learned so many things at that time, the level of discipline and drive and everything that it took. And it's so interesting that at the time I was getting ready to compete in the nationals, and there was a pro bodybuilder, Troy Zucolato. And he came to me, and this was a wake up call for me for business. He came to me and he said, Darin, he said, if there's anything that I can teach you in life, he says, get out of bodybuilding, dude. He says, these bodybuilders, they don't make money. He says, most of them are all broke. The top ones in the world, he goes, maybe the top one or two, they make a great living, but most of them are living on their friends' couches. They're borrowing money. They're not doing very well in life, right? And he says, but take that same drive and discipline that you've applied to this at such a young age of getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning and doing all these things and being so disciplined, and apply that towards business. And it's interesting how that resonates with me now when looking back. I went through 10 years, 15 years of complete chaos and partying here in Vegas, and definitely lost track of that. But at the end of the day, using those core principles that I learned and going back to those got me back on track to get back into business and start driving forward. And every time I lost a business or one of my businesses didn't make it, didn't go any further, or didn't succeed in the way that I felt that it was going to succeed, I learned something from every one of those. And I've taken something away from those every time. Everything from getting a bookkeeper, getting a CPA, learning to delegate has been one of the biggest things for me. It was one of my biggest challenges of all time. It's one of the things that I hear the most from business people, especially real estate people, is that they don't want to delegate because they're afraid somebody else can't do it the same way that they do it. And you're probably right. They probably can't. Sometimes they can do it better. Sometimes maybe they don't. But one of the things I learned in that was delegation and what I took away from it. So I'm going to stop for a minute here, and I want to just go to our Instagram live and mention that if you guys have any questions, please pop them up on there because we can see them, and I'll be sure to answer some of those questions as we're going. But all of this conversation is leading into talking about, again, opportunities. And so my business, I had a business starting in 2004. I started a distribution company. I was working part-time for another company doing sales. I would get up at 4 a.m., go make my deliveries for my distribution company. Started that company with $210. That's what I paid for the van that I bought to do the deliveries in. My dad helped me rebuild the engine. I negotiated credit lines with the vendors. I got a storage unit for $119 a month, started loading product in there. Flash forward 3 years later, I had 350 accounts, including Terrible Herbs in Green Valley. If you live here in Las Vegas, you know who those accounts are. And so I started growing that business, and man, I thought, you know what? This is finally it. After all the other failed businesses I've had, the car washing business, the carpet cleaning business, the distribution companies, the retail store, this business is finally it, man. We are growing. We're taking off. We had just opened a location in Colorado. We were opening up a location in Arizona, and 2008 hits. And my business partner at the time, he was in the construction business, and rightfully so, panicked and said, Darin, I need to pull out of this. We're done. We're closing shop. And I'm like, what do you mean we're closing shop? Like, I just left my job working for him to go full time with this business. And I was like, dude, what am I going to do? And he's like, I don't know. You need to go figure it out. And so at the time, what I did is we ended up closing the business, extremely depressed, in a really, really bad place in life, and actually took a bartending job. And it was the one thing I always swore as a resident of Las Vegas, the one thing I was never going to do growing up here, I'd never be a bartender, because for some reason I thought I was way above that. And so started bartending in 2008, spent a year there. And my first year there, I thought, this is so great. I don't have to worry about people anymore. I don't have to worry about employees or trucks or inventory or any of that stuff. I can just get on here and I can, I can come to work and check out and check in and be done with it. And then about 6 months in, I started thinking, man, I got to do something else. I can't do this forever. I would hear all these people complaining at work, and every server would come up to me and they would just start spilling their guts about how miserable they were. And then I'd ask them, well, how long you been here? And they're like, oh, I've been here 19 years. And I started thinking, holy shit, man, like, am I going to really be doing this the rest of my life? And so a friend of mine at the time, he kept telling me, man, you should get into real estate. You should get into real estate. Had been telling me that for years, wasn't telling me that in '08. But for some reason, I thought, you know what? I had read Think and Grow Rich. And the one thing I took away from Think and Grow Rich was that in good times, people sell, rich people sell, and in bad times, they buy. There's opportunities. And there was one particular story, I don't remember the exact details about it, but basically it was a gentleman that would buy real estate in bad times. He'd wait till good times. He would sell it all. He'd wait till bad times again, and then he'd buy up more real estate. And so I thought, you know what? Real estate, that sounds like a really good idea, because it's 2008 and it's the bottom of the pit, and it can't get any worse than where it's at. So I'm going to go ahead and get my real estate license. So at the time I was working graveyard. I'd go to work, I'd get up the next day. I'd go right from work to the real estate class, which was 8 o'clock in the morning. I'd go there till 12 noon, go home, work out, go to bed. Had a part-time job that I was working in the evening. I'd work there from 5 to 9. And so, yes, you're kind of adding this all up. I was getting maybe 2 to 3 hours of sleep a night. Lots of ephedrine, lots of caffeine, completely jacked up all the time on caffeine. Real quick, there's a question here. Leading to where you are now, is there anything you would change back than knowing what you know now? Good question on that. I don't believe in regrets. I don't think there's any regrets. There's nothing that I regret doing looking back. Because honestly, at the end of the day, it was all learning lessons. I think I'd be in a much different place. You know, if I was talking to somebody younger than me today, I would be in a much different place if I had not partied my brains out for 10 or 15 years. And the person who asked me that question knows, because they were there for some of those parties. I partied just as hard as I work. So if you can imagine my intensity with the way that I work, that was about the same way that I partied. But you know, looking back, I would say probably a few of the things I would have done is I would have attached myself to mentors. I know it's you, Rob. That's why I was directing that question to you. But you know, looking back, I think one of the things I would have done quickly was I found that the people who were guiding me in the right direction, maybe some of my older mentors, I distanced myself from a little bit more because I wasn't happy with where I was at. And I knew that they would call me out on it. And so I didn't want to be around those people that would call me out on it. And so it wasn't until I started putting myself back around those people. And I had some great friends too that would still call me out on it. But, you know, at the time we were having fun and partying, so who cared? But, you know, I learned a lot from those days. And I always think back that, you know, I could look back and say, hey, if I would have been successful and made a lot of money when I was in my early 20s, would I be where I'm at today? Probably not. I'd probably be dead, to be honest with you, because the way that I did party. And so, you know, we can always look back at things and say, damn, what would I change? What would I do differently? But I also have realized as I've gotten older is that every one of those experiences that I've gone through, and the reason I say this is that today, the one thing that I'm learning is that there's so many people in my life that are going through the same thing, right? There's so many people in my life that are going through where I was at in my 20s. And now I have the opportunity to mentor those people. And there's no greater way to mentor someone and for someone to trust you and believe you when you can literally sit there and say, oh, you only party 3 nights a week? Shit, dude, I partied 6 nights a week, right? Like, and then they can understand that you're real and you get where they're coming from. And then they start to listen to you differently. And that's how it was for me. As I've met mentors that I respected the most, those were the people that had grinded the most. They had made the most failures. They weren't the perfect people. None of my mentors today, none of the people that I follow are the most perfect people. In fact, they're the opposite. They were probably some of the most damaged people who were able to recover and come out of that and grow. And that's why I respect them. And that's why I like to be mentored by them, is because they know what to do and they know how to figure their self out of shit when things get bad. And so, so again, you know, looking back, you know, I appreciate all those times and everything that I went through, because now I can relate to people. I can relate to people that are on my team. even sharing my experience, I shared a couple months ago, I've been going to a therapist for 14 years. And, for the longest time, people were even afraid to say that they went to therapy because they thought that people would immediately thought they, would think they were crazy. And I was one of them. When I first went to therapy, my biggest resistance was, number one, I thought I was clinically nuts myself. And so I thought for sure that they were going to have me taken to the hospital or locked up. And so my therapist, I never forget when I first met her, she started laughing when I told her that. She said, well, first of all, if you're crazy, you wouldn't even know that you're crazy. And so you wouldn't even be thinking that. But she goes, it's pretty funny that you think that. And then the other thing that was so interesting about therapy back at that time when I went through it was that I always had related my personality, the level of intensity and how crazy I was, and just kind of like this crazy mentality to why I was succeeding in sales, or what I thought. At that time, I thought I was succeeding in sales because I did so well in the companies that I worked for in selling at the time that I thought, oh, you know what? I'm afraid that if I go to a therapist, it's going to change my personality and who I am and what I do. And it didn't. It actually did the opposite. It actually made me, the biggest thing that I learned from it was that it made me a better listener. And it taught me how to listen to people and learn and relate with them versus just always, throwing stuff up on them and pushing it down their throat until they agreed to take what I was trying to sell to them. And so one of the biggest things it did is it just changed the way that I sell, but it also helped me grow so much as a person and completely changed me in great ways. And so I always tell people that, therapy, and it's even with any of the people that I'm mentoring now, one of the things I always share with them is, man, you should go see a therapist. Sharing with your friends and your family, these people are going to always be on your side. They're going to always agree with you, right? Because they love you. And they don't want to tell you that you're wrong. They want to support you and see all the good things in you. That's not always what's best for you. You need the people who are going to be truthful with you and give you sometimes the shit that you don't want to hear, because that's what you need to hear. And that's where you'll start to actually make the changes if you're willing to listen, number one, and then willing to make those changes. And that's been one of the biggest things that I've learned through therapy and just through some of the mentors that I've been with. But going back to 2008, getting my real estate license, getting into real estate in the worst time possible. But again, I've always had this, like my dad said, he'd never give up. And that's one of the other things that he's always taught us is that you never get up or give up. You always get up, but you never give up. Never give up, and you constantly keep moving forward. And he's like, Darin, even when you get knocked down, my dad grew up in foster care, never had parents. His parents died when he was 6 years old. And so, he learned all these things the hard way. And that's why I always joke with people that he raised us like Marines, because that's how he was taught to parent. He went into the Marines, believe it or not, when he was 16, lied about his age and went into Korea. And because he had nowhere else to go, he was booted out of the foster care home that he was in. And so always in the back of my mind, no matter where I was at in life and when I was failing, I always still had this vision of where I was looking to get to, no matter how bad things were getting. And no matter how much I felt I had already failed, the one thing that you couldn't stop me from was getting up again and believing that I was gonna accomplish something great and that I was gonna be successful. And so I went back with that same mindset into real estate. And it's so interesting how, they talk about manifestation and all this different stuff and how you create things. And it really is true, because I just started going to the gym and I was reading my book and I just knew, and it's interesting because when I was in my real estate class, one of the questions they asked me at that time was, what's your, write down your goals and what's your number one goal? And my number one goal was that I was going to work for the number one luxury team in Las Vegas. Don't even know where that came from. I just knew that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to sell high-end real estate and get into luxury real estate. And so that was my first goal, was that I'm going to work for the number one team. Didn't even know who it was. So I happened to be riding the bike one day at the gym, and a friend of mine comes up who I always thought was a real estate agent, because he always said that he was in real estate. And he says, Darin, are you getting your real estate license? I said, yeah. He goes, dude, what the hell are you thinking? He's like, 2008, right? Like, this is the worst time ever in real estate to get your license. And I said, no, Scott. I said, I get it, man. I said, but the difference is that I'm going to sell luxury, and that clients that are successful, when times are bad, they buy, and when times are good, they sell. And so I'll always have business there. And plus I'm going to go work for the number one team. And he said, well, who's the number one team? And at the time I said, oh, this person, because I saw their ad in the newspaper or in the magazine. And he's like, no, they're not the number one team. Let me introduce you to the number one team. And so he actually went, made a call, comes back and introduced me to Ivan Schur and Florence Shapiro. And at the time I had no idea who they were because I didn't know anything about real estate. And so I went and met with them. I was scared to death. I always tell people the story that the day that I went, I was literally at one of the lowest points in my life, but I didn't want to disappoint him. And I knew this was an opportunity, but I was literally at a point in my life where I cashed in change from my car. I had change in my car. My car was on E. I cashed it in. I had enough gas to get there and get back to work that night. And so I went and met with them. The meeting seemed to be going really well. And then Ivan comes in and he says, you know what, man? He goes, I think we're going to send you over to this other place. You can start there. And, and then come back and see us in a few years when you have some experience. And I said, okay, great. And then for some reason he stops and he says, you know what, let me go grab Florence. So he goes and grabs Florence and he comes back in and Florence comes in and I can tell you to this day, it's so crazy. Honestly, it makes me like a little emotional. Here comes Florence. And it was like this energy that I can't even describe to you guys. If you knew Florence, you would know exactly what I'm talking about. But she walks in with this energy and she sits down and the first question she asked me is, Darin, what's your sphere of influence like? And I'm like, what? Your sphere of influence. And once she explained to me what my sphere was, I went into sales mode and I started selling because I knew like, this was it, man. Like this was my chance to get the big deal done and to get my opportunity to get to the next step. And so we sit there and we talk for a little bit. She gets up. She says, I'll be right back. Ivan comes back in. He says, okay, man, you're going to start here. And that's when I got my first opportunity into getting into real estate. And so, of course, first thing that friends start asking me, well, Darin, what's your splits? What you paying them? When you're on a team, you're going to pay all these splits and this and this. And I said, dude, I don't even care. I got an opportunity with the best team in the Valley. I have no real estate experience. There's no reason they should have even brought me on this team. So I will pay them to join their team. I don't even care. I will go wash their cars, whatever I need to do. I have the opportunity to learn from the two best luxury real estate agents in the Valley and probably in the nation at that time, and still today. And so I had that opportunity and I was like, look, it's not about the money for me. It's about the learning opportunity. And so when I first walked into luxury real estate, the first 2 years was all about learning. And that's the way I walked into it. Is I said, look, you know what? I never went to college. And so this is going to be my college and I'm going to pay my dues and I'm going to grind and work for a couple of years. And I did. And so for those first 5 years of working with Ivan and Florence, it was definitely tough. Every year they had to talk me out of quitting. And this goes back to surrounding yourself and putting yourself around the right people. And that's the one thing I've definitely learned over the past 10 years is that it really does matter who you put yourself around. Because if I would not have been on that team, if I would have joined another team, if I would have gone independently in real estate, I can almost guarantee that I probably still would not be in real estate at this point because I was so down on myself at that point in life that I didn't see where I was going. Luckily, I had two people around me that did. And so that was a really, really awesome time in my life because every year as my renewal would come up for my license and I didn't have the money, I'm like, holy shit, I'm broke. They said, no, Darin, you're not giving up. You're not giving up. And like, how do you tell Florence and Ivan you're giving up? You don't. Like, they gave me an opportunity. I couldn't quit on them. So every year I kept going. I tried all these different businesses. I was working part-time jobs. I owned a health food store for a year. I did all this different stuff in the 5 years. And finally, 2014, Ivan and Florence come to me. And this was literally the last year where I'm like, okay, if I can't make it this year, I am done. Like, I've put 5 years into this. I'm broke. I'm not making money. I'm absolutely done. And Florence and Ivan come to me and they said, hey, Darin, we know that you've been selling a lot of land because my background, I had sold fireplaces and windows and was selling to custom home builders. And they're like, you know, we know that you've done startups and kind of been an entrepreneur. We think that you would be a good fit for this new development that we're opening. And I said, oh, okay, great. So they take me out there and it's a Skya. And they drive me around and they show me the community. And I'm like, holy crap, this place is amazing. Like I've never ran anything like this. What the hell am I going to do? And so they said, would you like the opportunity? Well, of course, I'm not going to say no. I'll figure it out. So anyway, flash forward, we go through the interview process. I meet the owners. I'm at the point in my life where, again, I'm still so down. Like, I literally remember, how am I going to make my $350 car payment? And driving. And I can tell you to this day where I was at the point, I was on the 215 exit in Flamingo, and Ivan calls me and he says, "Hey man, I just looked over the contract, and here's what your salary is going to be." And in my mind, I had already set I thought it was going to be $65,000 because that was the most I'd ever made at that point. And he says, it's $120,000 a year plus bonuses. And I'm like, oh, okay. And he goes, is that good? And I said, yeah. I hang up and I call him back and I go, shit, dude, I'm so sorry. Like, I was completely caught off guard. I never realized it was going to be that amount of money. And I'm completely shocked. And literally, it was crazy how in that moment, I mean, that completely changed my life. I went from the most I'd ever made at that point, I think in my life was $51,000, to now having a job that was going to make $120,000 a year. I was getting an opportunity to manage and run a $1 billion development when it's all completed, which was a huge scare to me. Lesson from that is that sometimes you have to do things that scare you so fucking bad that you have to make it work, that it makes you wake up. You can't sleep in because you are so damn scared that you're going to fail that you can't sleep in. And that's where I was at least for the first year. Literally every day I woke up stressed out, nervous. Not that I was, at that point, the great thing was that it was no longer about failing for me. It was, I didn't want to fail for Ivan and Florence because they believed in me. And that's, again, where it goes back to having those right people around you who believe in you. And when other people believe in you so much, there's no way you can let them down. And it's not even about letting yourself down at that point. And so I continued to work there, grew the business, managed the development, really had the opportunity to start to grow my own brand and get myself out there. And then flash forward, 5 years later, after being there, contract ends. I'd been working with Ivan and them for quite a long time and just really was kind of lost in trying to figure out what I was going to do. I didn't want to go back to managing. I wanted to just, couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. Even at one point, I told my wife, I don't know if I still want to be in real estate anymore. And that's when I met Craig, started my own team. And that's where I'm at today, guys, is that now I've had this opportunity to grow this great team. And, every day I'm learning something from this as well. Every day I'm learning things that, I was just on the call with my coach this morning. And one of the best things that I've learned in business is delegating. And I've gotten probably almost too good at it now, where I learned to delegate everything. But what it's done is it's freed up my time, because the one thing in every business and every friend that I've had that's owned a business in the past, the one thing that I've learned is that they all spend, and they will all say this when their business fails and they look back and they're like, Darin, the one thing that biggest mistake that I made was I spent more time working in my business than on my business. And so the one thing that I've learned now is to step back. And I've pulled myself out of the business on a day-to-day, level. And now I can focus really on building the business from the outside and looking at it. And so it's been interesting over the past couple of weeks as I've made this change. I've kind of feel lost. I even tell my wife the other day, I went home at like 2:00 in the afternoon. I didn't know what the hell to do because I didn't have anything to do. And I was like, oh shit, I need to get back to work because I'm so used to my day being filled with all these different things. And so, it's just part of the growing process. And it's one of the things that I'm learning as I grow with my business is that there's definitely going to be times that you don't know what you're doing. And that no matter how much direction people can give you, everybody's business is a little bit different. And the guidance that they give you is going to be a little bit different. And what you have to do, it's the same thing I learned back when I was competing in bodybuilding, is that I took a little bit of what everybody told me and I would blend it up. I would follow first. I would emulate and shadow the ones that were highly successful. And I did exactly what they were doing. And then as I started to create my own program, I would start to make little modifications based off of what each one of these people were doing to what worked for me. And I still do that today in business, is that as my business is growing, I will model someone and I'll do exactly what they're doing because it's working for them. And then I start to modify that and I make it my own. And so that's one of the biggest things that I'm learning as I grow my business is that, one, pull myself out of it so I can see it from the outside. Also putting myself around people who are much bigger than me. And I mean that from in every level. That can be financially, that can be physically, that can be mentally, relationship wise, family, whatever it is. But putting myself around people who have what I want so that I can make myself want to step up to that. And I always use this example when I competed in bodybuilding. When I was younger, I was 15 years old, 16 years old, guys that I went to high school with would want to train together. And I'd say to them, no, I don't want to work out with you. I work out with the guys at the gym. These guys that were, my wife laughs when I say this, they were 30, 35 years old, completely juiced out of their mind and crazy. And those are the guys that I wanted to go train with. Those are the guys that I wanted to crush me in the gym. I wanted to feel like I needed to step up to their level because I was so far behind. And that's where I'm putting myself at today to get myself to the next level of where I want to be at in my career, is to be able to put myself around people that have what I want or are operating at a much higher level. And that doesn't just mean, like I said, financially. That to me, I don't really look at the dollars on a day-to-day basis. I look at what I'm trying to grow, because that's more important to me. I want to create things. The money will come. That's the one thing I've also learned, is that, although I always have a dollar figure in my mind of where I want to be, just because it's a way to measure of where you're going. Ultimately, mostly what I measure is my progress in my business. How many people do I have on my team? How many listings? How many transactions? In my other business, it's the same way. Where am I at with that? How many customers do I have? Do I have other people working with me now? Am I able to put somebody else in management? And immediately now, instead of me looking at what I'm going to be working on a day-to-day basis and what I'm going to do for myself, I'm looking at where I can grow to, and already thinking my supplement business I've relaunched. And as I grow that my first thoughts now are not just who I can land as customers, but I'm already looking to see who I'm going to put in as my operations manager, who I'm going to put in as my salesperson, who am I going to, who's going to handle my accounting, who's going to handle all this stuff. I'm already thinking far ahead so that as I'm getting there, I'm already in the position to put myself in a place where I've got those people to cover it. Because I think sometimes we wait way too long. We just had this conversation yesterday about building a team. And I think people set milestones and they say, okay, when I get to X, then I'll hire X. The problem is sometimes when you get to X, you're so overwhelmed that you start to fail your customers and you start to fail your clients. And so sometimes you have to put that infrastructure in place first to allow yourself to grow, right? Kind of a weird example to use would be like, if you wanted to get fat, you'd buy bigger pants, right? Or you want to go the opposite way. You want to lose weight, you buy smaller pants. I'll use that example. And you want to get into a smaller pant size or whatever it is. It's just an example that I'm using, is that you've got to kind of already think forward so that you can grow to that. And so that's where I'm at in my business today, is that now I'm thinking forward and I'm thinking, okay, what's the next steps? Where do I get to next? And again, the money will all come with that. So the thing I find sometimes is that in the past, everybody talks about, oh, you got to have your goal, your dollar amount set and how much you want to make and all this. But the one thing I found is that I got myself too tied up in focusing on the money and not focusing on what the accomplishments were with my business that I was looking for. So I'm going to stop here again real quick. I just want to mention to anybody on Instagram Live, if you have any questions while we're on here, feel free to post them and I'll answer those questions for you. Aaron, any questions so far? All right, sounds good. I've had a lot of caffeine today. So when I found out I didn't have a guest today, I'm like, shit. Well, it wasn't that I found out I didn't have one. I forgot to book one. And so again, talk about handling on the fly. I'm like, well, screw it. I had a lot of caffeine this morning, had a good workout. And so I'm going to just go in. I'm going to do this on my own. But anyway, so guys, I hope a lot of this helps you. Again, I like to always give background because, it's interesting. I laughed a few months ago. I was in a luxury panel and someone came up to me and they said, well, yeah, but your life has been different than mine because I'm sure you grew up around money. And I laughed and I was like, oh, really? What makes you think that? And they're like, well, you're in luxury. Most people that are in luxury, they have families that are in money. Standard issue, Darin. I don't know what that is, Rob. But I didn't grow up around money. And so it wasn't like I could just walk into luxury because I had all these relationships and family members and everything that I could utilize for transactions. my family, we weren't wealthy by any means. My dad had lost his business in the early 80s. That's when we moved down here to Southern Nevada. And, but again, I watched my dad. There was never a day, and I always give my dad tons of credit. There was never a day that my dad laid around and felt sorry for himself. Every day, even when he didn't have a job, he went out and he found work every day, whether it was painting someone's car, fixing their house, doing something, which has taught me to be resourceful. As I've gotten older, as I went through times where I was struggling financially, I was always resourceful and always found ways to create income one way or the other. And, the caffeine. Yes, that is a constant, a standard issue for me, Rob. Yeah, so, I always like to share these things because I think everybody sometimes has a perception of where people have come from based off of where they're at today. And it was even cool a couple of weeks ago, I pulled up to a guard gate at Spanish Trail, and the guard, she says, "Oh my God, your car is my dream car." And I said, "Oh, well, you'll have one of these someday." And she's like, "Oh, I hope." And I said, "Well, don't worry about it." I said, "My last car was a beat up Hyundai." So I said, if that gives you any hope, my last car was a beat up Hyundai that the engine blew up on it. So anyway, so guys, I just want to take the time and thank you today. Hopefully some of this was helpful. Do you think any of it was helpful, Darin? Let's see if we got any other questions. I did text a few people, and we'll sit here and chat for a few minutes. No questions. Are prices going down? I did have somebody ask that question. That's related to real estate. That was a whole another question. They weren't related to my podcast, but I will talk about that for a moment. I think a lot of people are questioning where we're at in the market right now. I like to always remain very optimistic. Look, the bottom line is there's going to be 50% of us that are right and 50% of us that are wrong. And I like to hedge on the side of remaining positive about the opportunities that there are in this market. I can proudly say that our team has actually already broken our sales number for last year. We beat our entire year of sales already for this year. So I'm really proud of my team for that. And so I think that comes down to, Aaron, can you say they said Aaron's she's going to pop in here for a minute to send a question. It says no questions yet. It says I sent a question through the question section. Sorry about that. If you can post that in the feed, maybe. For some reason, it's not showing up in the question section. So sorry about that. Where the market's at today. So, we've seen the lower price points come to a screeching halt. That's common because I think a lot of people have panicked with the higher interest rates. I'll answer your question in just a minute. But I still believe that a couple things are going to happen. Number one, let's remember that the majority of the people that are sitting on the market today don't need to sell. They're not underwater. They have tons of equity in their home, which is completely different from 2008. Most people were into their home at least 100%, and they were completely upside down and had no choice but to sell their home because they had lost their job or they had too many homes and they couldn't cover the expenses. And so they were forced to sell those homes. The difference in today's market is that it's roughly 85% of the people in our market right now have 6 figures or more in equity in their home. Nobody's giving that away. So what they're going to do is they're going to pull their homes off the market. So actually, I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say that what we're going to probably see first quarter to second quarter of next year is we're going to see again a shortage of inventory because we're already beginning to see sellers pull their homes off the market who no longer need to sell. I think the opportunity in this market for anybody who's in the building industry is that people are going to begin to renovate. And so they're going to pull that equity out of their house that they're already living in, and they're going to begin to renovate the home that they're in. And so you're going to see that inventory begin to shrink. I think that's on the lower price points. The rental market's going to pick up because now you have your first-time home buyers and, and on the lower price points that can no longer qualify because of the interest rates going up. Those clients are going to begin to look for homes to rent. So there's opportunities for even with people sitting with equity in their home to where they can use that equity to purchase another home as a rental and now begin to rent that property out. The opportunity in the luxury space is that we know that things in California, as far as taxes, are not changing anytime soon. 60 to 70% of our buyer base that is coming in to buy luxury homes, that I would say for the most part, 2 million plus, are California buyers. That's 60 to 70% of them. That's not going to slow down anytime soon. In fact, if anything, I see that beginning to ramp up because as inflation increases and as costs increase, these people are going to begin to look for any way that they can save money. We just had a client of the day who's retiring. And so for them, they don't want 13% of their retirement income to go to the state. And so they're moving to Nevada to save on money. And so I think we're going to still continue to see that constant flow of luxury buyers, and interest rates don't affect the luxury buyer as much as they do on the lower price points, first-time home buyers and stuff. And so I think we're going to begin to see that. Also, what you're going to see, which I've always had huge faith in, is that people are smart, people are creative. We've got a lot of really smart people out there. We're already beginning to see it, that people are structuring different types of loans. That doesn't mean loans that are, stated income loans, those type of things like we used to see. But now you're seeing like these 2-in-1s where if you take this 2-1 loan today, your interest rate today would be 4.5%. Next year it's 5.5%, goes back up to 6.5%. And they're doing that because they're expecting that as the recession kicks in, next year we will see a reduction in interest rates again to spur the economy. And that at that point, you will see people, then they can refinance, they can get out of that 2-1, get that lower interest rate, move forward. ARMs have become popular. You're seeing a lot of 10-1 ARMs. The ARMs of the past are a lot different than the ones today. From my understanding, there's more of a cap on those ARMs today, and that's what you'd want to check with your lender about. I'm obviously not a lender. I'm just telling you the information that I hear. And so some of those interest rates on those are even low. I mean, we've seen as low as like 4.1 to 4.5% on those ARMs. And I use the ARMs as an example because most people don't even stay in their home for longer than 7 to 10 years. And those ARMs are 10 years. And so that's another thing that we're going to begin to see. We're already beginning to see sellers, and I highly encourage this. I hate when agents just straight up use price reductions as the best way to sell a home. To me, you're no longer a salesperson, you're an order taker if that's the only strategy that you're using. There should be a lot of other things, and just a suggestion to sellers out there: before your agent recommends a price reduction, ask them why. And I'll give you an example. One of my listings we had that was listed at 1.5, hadn't sold, been sitting on the market, but when we looked at it, there had been no activity in that area for 6 months. Hardly any buyers out there. So it wasn't a matter of pricing because we were in line with the pricing. It was a matter of that there's no buyers out there. Now, of course, everybody says, well, sure, if you drop your price to a certain point, you're going to eventually sell it. Well, of course you will, right? But is that what you want to do? Is that what your strategy is? Or is that what, is important to you? Most people that were selling their home weren't trying to sell it just because they need to get rid of it. They're selling it because they can make a certain amount of equity at where prices were at months ago. And so their neighbors came on the market, $300,000 less than them, same model. Then they dropped the home $100,000, still no showings. And so be careful on the price reductions. It's not always the way to sell the property. What I've been suggesting to sellers is instead offer to buy down the interest rate for the buyer. Most people are reluctant on buying because the interest rate, not because the price. And so I would strongly suggest making that more of an incentive. And I think that as we round the corner into next year, with that shrinkage of inventory of people pulling the homes off the market that don't need it, and the combination of interest rates dropping, I think we're going to see a spur, this ramp up of home sales again, like we saw over the past couple of years. I don't think we'll still quite see what we saw, but I think the market will still become very strong. And, anybody relating this market to 2008 is completely off. The factors of 2008 are so much different than today that I don't see that happening again. Answer your question, you open to interviewing small business owners outside of real estate? Yes, of course. In fact, I would like other business owners other than real estate. Happens to be the first few people that I've interviewed have been in the real estate industry because that's who I'm the closest to. That's who I talk to every day. But yes, I would love owners of, MMA gyms or gyms. I mean, they've gone through some of the toughest struggles over the past couple of years. I have a lot of friends that own gyms. And I mean, if anybody has been able to fight through it and survive, and anybody has taken it a bigger kick in the nuts, gyms have taken a huge kick in the nuts. and they're still trying to pull out of that. So yes, I would love to speak to gym owners, anybody who started their business in a recession, 2008 especially. If you were able to start your business and thrive through that time, or you had your business prior and then took a huge hit and were able to reinvent your business during that time and come back. Those are the stories that I want to share with people, because that's what I think is so important. That as we get so tied up in what we hear on the news and that the world is, falling apart. And I always go back to what my dad says. He says, my dad's 88 years old and always says, Darin, don't stress about it, because I can tell you 10 times in my life, at least, I've heard that the world's going to end. I've heard that this is going to happen. I've heard all these horrible things that we all still keep hearing today, because it just completely cycles itself. And speaking of that, there's a great book called The Fourth Turning. You guys ever want to put your mind at ease or maybe stress you out a little bit more, because you'll understand where we're at in the seasons, I'd pick up the book, The Fourth Turning. But yes, I would definitely love to interview other gym owners or other business owners in any business industry, and get their insight on what they've done I was just reading a question there. So should have wore my glasses today. But anyway, so yes, I would love to get those stories out there. And so anybody feel free to reach out to me. You can message us through Instagram or Facebook, or email us. Go to my website, dmgluxury.com, and you can just shoot us an email through there. Or you can even text me. I'll give out my cell number, 702-485-7755. Just shoot me a text. I would love to have you on the show. And we're going to wrap up today. I think we're about 45 minutes in. I was able to pull this off with lots of caffeine and just going random. So anyway, guys, thank you. This is episode 4. We will be back. I do have some great people lined up. I've got a good friend of mine she's an interior designer. She's got a phenomenal story. This lady definitely made it through some hard times, and she's probably one of the top luxury interior designers in the market now. She'll be coming on the show. I'm looking really forward to that, and a few other friends and colleagues that will be on here as well. So thank you, guys. I look forward to hearing from you, and continue to follow me and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you.